Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm sorry that you had the very informal introduction to Hobart. My name's Jennifer Nichols and I'm the Executive Director of the Tasmanian and the International Chapters. Thank you all for coming along and joining us via Zoom. Firstly, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional and original owners of this land. I mean, we're many lands tonight, but in my case, it's the Tasmanian Aboriginal people, the Lutruwita people. And I'd like to pay my respect to those who have passed before us and acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the continual custodians of this land. So tonight we have, we're joined by Rodney Eggleston from Arch Studio and Neil Bourne from Denton Corker Marshall. And both of them in recent years have explored projects in Hobart. And so we're going to hear about those projects tonight from afar. So they're both joining us, I believe, from Melbourne, and give us some insight into their design and their processes and their experience in Tasmania. So first up, we have Rodney from Arch Studio, and he'll take us through the design and construction processes for the Kingborough Community Hub at Kingston. The Kingborough Community Hub reflects the needs of a community. Their vision was to weave a program of architecture and landscape together to create a rich and vibrant community asset for the Kingston area. Central to this project is flexibility, reconfigurable spaces and sustainability. This is a building for all, a proud civic gesture constructed from utilitarian materials, a robust piece of public infrastructure to serve the people of Kingston, and a building able to be shaped in any way the locals see fit. The material palette has been designed to celebrate the history of local industries in the region. So this project, as you may be aware, has won numerous awards, including the Alan C. Walker Award for Public Architecture at the Tasmanian Architecture Awards, the Colorbond Steel Award at the Tasmanian Awards, as well as being shortlisted for the National Architecture Awards. So please welcome Victorian Emerging Architect winner and Australian Institute of Arts of Awards Tasmanian winner, Rodney Eggleston. Thanks, Rodney.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for the intro. I'll jump straight into it. The Kingborough Community Hub is really for us our first public project and something that we were very proud to be a part of. We entered a competition many years ago, as it seems now, and we were fortunate enough to win that competition. And the project really kept intact from its original idea, which is lovely. Doesn't usually happen. For those who don't know Kingston, this is Kingston, and this is the location of the community hub. So it sits sort of back from the coastline and off to the side of the river, and this kind of curious situation where the town exists, but then there's this new development happening at the back of the town, being the new Kingston Park, that there's display suites there at the moment to buy a house and to live there. So they're developing all this vacant land. It's the former Kingston High School, and it's really a greenfield site of epic proportions when you see how big the town is and then how big this site is. And the idea with the community hub was really to put it in there first as a bit of a catalyst that would then encourage this new suburb to be built around it. There's also a massive park going in behind it at the moment, which is almost finished, and it just looks fantastic. I know that when I come down next with my kids, we'll be going through there and going exploring. So this was the old Kingston High School back in the day. And this was the site when we were asked to perform the competition. And the competition really talked about either using the building that was there or eradicating it completely and starting again. It's a 1972 Public Works Department building. It's not the world's best piece of architecture, but it's solid It's got value within its columns. There's a lot of concrete. The fact that it's out of the ground already was something that we were really interested in maintaining. And this sense of memory as well, this idea that a lot of kids had gone through this place. I mean, I have friends who went through this school, and you know, they were talking to me about that gym and climbing up and down. So there was a sense of kind of trying to preserve not only the materials of that space, but also the proportionality of it as well. And it was really these column grids that's been pulled out here by this graffiti artist that is the most powerful part of that building, that really informed our competition response and the design of the new community hub. So as I mentioned before, this is the existing gymnasium, and then we sort of sat this new building directly on top. And from the early day, it really was this idea of how the column grid would then be expressed as this quite heroic structure that would then take this very large parasol roof and extend the footprint of the gymnasium to create these intermediate spaces that were partially indoor, partially outdoor, or a mixture of the two. And the engineer, I should mention, Tim Watson, you know, who basically used the existing structure to get this thing to hold, was quite an incredible feat. But as we know, you know, buildings built in the 70s are more solid than those that are built today. So there was this fascination with this idea of it being a large shed as well, and designing our way through this large structure that could be, as Jennifer mentioned in the intro, as flexible as possible. There was really this understanding that council were able to build this building with federal funding and state funding, but there was also this kind of idea of what do we actually need this building for, and how do you build a building that you don't exactly know how it's going to be used when it's still in a concept stage. So the thinking is really about how might you create an aperture and something that's completely flexible, that you can then clip in and clip out of and make flexible spaces and flexible zones. We were also really interested in this idea of the community centre being a very proud civic gesture, and you know, talking about the local community, talking about the people that live there, and really branding it with that on the front facade. So you get this quite heroic sign that we designed in-house. We tried to change all the branding of the council as well. And it sort of harks back to this notion of the Bunnings warehouse as well, these kind of enormously large sheds that are then branded. Ian McDougall from Ashton Raggett McDougall talked about the Bunnings warehouse being the last real community centre, because the local netball team can set up a tent and sell sausage sizzles, and we really liked referencing this idea. And there's also this attempt for the building to grab attention to the main street, so you get these views through car parks off the main street of the building, and with Kunyanli beyond. And the attempt of the sign trying to sort of, you know, bring it to the foreground, which we thought was a really nice way of identifying the site. In the beginning, the brief was very much about, you know, activation, and these were some of the diagrams that were used to present to council. And what we realised pretty quickly was that the brief was a bit upside down. We had to flip some things around to get these activation of spaces, but also plugging in different spaces that would give solar exposure, views onto the mountain beyond, and these intermediate spaces where people could spill out and create, you know, all sorts of opportunities through community gardens and others. One part of the brief was really to unpack what the Kingston community really wanted to do down there. And so we facilitated a bit of an online survey, which was really interesting, and sort of then went through and categorized all the different responses. Lots of people talked about free all-day car parking, even though there was nothing there. Lots of bike racks were requested. But it was really useful to sort of move through these different requirements and create something where, you know, all sorts of things could occur. These are the bike racks being used as they were supposed to be. Thank God now there's a full playground out the back there. And then obviously taking those ideas and beginning to rate them and find ways that we could reprogram them into the space. So in the previous gymnasium, there was these really quite beautiful markings on the ground of days of the kind of school fete, when you would have sort of different things being sold. And we really thought that this was a great way of activating the space by suggesting different line markings that could then be occupied or could be translated or interpreted in a certain manner. And part of our competition entry talked about ways in which we might begin to connect all the spaces together, have sort of a basketball court scenario or potentially a car show. And what really happened in the end was the building became, with the councillors, a bit of a conversation about the colours. You know, some people thought it was too red, so we tried blue. Then it was a sort of introduce a bit more kind of other tones into it. And the fascination of the project really became about the wayfinding and the graphics, because everyone was obsessed with the image of the plan, which was kind of interesting. And as a result, the rest of the building, a lot of the details and the ambition of the building were not really discussed. So that was really interesting to us, and sort of working through these different graphic representations and imagining how certain spaces might be used. In the early competition entry, it was this kind of really saturated use of colour and use of graphic to activate the space. And I think it was really an attempt to try to populate what was really quite a vast building. I mean, we're very used to doing small, tight, intricate spaces, and this was a very large, open space for us that we were sort of trying to always fill up with something. But I think what was really interesting about it, and there is still the possibility that this floor graphic in some form goes ahead, is the reality of going from the image where you imagine this certain usage to the reality of what gets built. But then at the end of the day, as people begin to occupy and use the space, they bring the colour and the interaction within it. And so this kind of reality, this is at the opening day where people are bringing those tents, the exact same tent that you have in front of Bunnings, and slipping it under a canopy, even though there's already shelter there. It's creating this civic structure that can really be a catalyst for accepting all this stuff that comes along with various events. There's a number of cinema screens that retract out, and you know, it's this kind of notion of imagining this thing spilling out onto the playground beyond, but then also kind of accepting the reality of the food trucks that always will kind of park wherever they want to. So it really is a big shed, and you can see it here connecting to the existing column grid. We kept all the existing floor structure as well. This is an interesting kind of aside. This was a project, one of our first projects that we did, and it really reminds us of what we were trying to set up in the community hub. So this is a little bar in Melbourne called Section 8, and Section 8 was just constructed out of pretty rudimentary parts, transport pallets, Hopley's trusses, and it was so rudimentary that actually it got the front cover of Architecture Australia, but nobody actually knew that it was designed. They just thought it had grown over time, and we found that super interesting. And today it sits underneath all this other stuff, under this kind of greenery and plastic blinds and all sorts of things that have been brought and added to it. So we're hoping over time that the community hub sort of takes on those extra layers where it begins to really become part of its surroundings and part of the community. So just to run you through the moves, the existing building, stripped back to the existing structure and leaving that subfloor, we saved about 3 months, you know, with being out of the ground, and we could start sort of constructing straight away off that column grid. There's the auxiliary services and buildings around. There's a kind of attempt to to wrap some back of house around these central halls. And then there's this auxiliary building that is a series of flexible partitionable spaces that can be reprogrammed at will, including co-working spaces, et cetera, et cetera. To the right here, there is a tenancy set up. This one is actually now the tenancy for the houses that are being sold around. So it's kind of display suite, but hopefully one day will be a cafe, community gardens to be added. And then this flexible undercover space that can connect outside via a large door, so that you get this ability to separate the spaces, but also create one large space that's, you know, 2/3 undercover or completely open. The door itself is an airport kind of style door that's clad in fiberglass, and is really this gesture to then connect the interior with the exterior and the views beyond. You can see it here operating during the opening, and really gives you this incredible sense of openness throughout the entire space and environment. Really love the back of the sign in this view here. And so we imagine different kind of, you know, car shows or markets and different things being used in the space, but also that there's these finer grain moments where you have these laneways and streetscapes and connectivity through the building that speaks to this idea of a whole series or a village. We imagined, you know, school kids going there and doing gymnastics and then sitting on the front steps waiting for their parents to pick them up, but also being under shelter from the canopy of the roof. And this kind of system that connects the two buildings together, that's going to hopefully one day be covered in this vine that begins to grow over the top. There's also all sorts of permeability through the east-west configuration of the building, so that you can open doors up and get through, and these moments where buildings come apart and serve for bathroom facilities and other kind of utilitarian things that are required for large events. The trusses are really an interesting part of the project. They were originally conceived in CLT. We were kind of a bit ignorant about CLT technology in Australia at the time. Turned out to be more cost effective to make them out of steel and then clad them over with plywood. And we sort of liked the utilitarian nature of the steel trusses, but realised pretty quickly that you know, that could be a possibility for nesting birds. But in the end, you know, using this shadow clad and cladding over the top, we're really happy with the result. And the trusses are working very hard, but there's also an attempt to make them quite playful in the way in which they sort of, you know, swap sides and begin to get a bit of rhythm through the space. And then the other real hero of the project is this Aramax roof, which I think is the first time it's been used in Tasmania. Aramax is an incredible product. It's basically, these things come out, they deliver a container to site that has a roll former in it, and then they bring the rolls of steel and they thread through the roll former this steel, and out the other end comes this incredible, not rigid, quite sort of like an enormous, this 40-metre long noodle that gets craned up, and then it's only when it gets fixed in position that it gets rigid. But what you get out of this is this incredible span. You get rid of all your purlins and all this other unnecessary structure. And for us, it was a really great way of solving the problem of getting this very elegant, very lightweight roof system that could sort of levitate above, but also become a bit of an identifier and a heroic opportunity for the folk down at Kingborough. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Rodney. And I don't know if you realise this, but we, or the Tassie chapter actually was approached at the very beginning of this process by the General Manager of Kingborough Council and wanting to get, I suppose, our guidance on the competition process. And we actually had a member who worked with them as a competitions advisor, which was Scott Barnforth of from Tarawa.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so we've, and you know, it's really interesting seeing this project, I suppose, become a reality.
Yeah.
Having sort of spoken with them all along the way about the process and the project. So
that's
my
amazing.
understanding is the community are delighted with it.
It's really going to be an incredible part of Tasmania, particularly when that have you seen that park that they're building behind there?
So is that Play Street who are designing that?
It is, yeah.
Miriam and Carl, yes.
I've got some I've got a bit of drone footage here.
I'd love to see.
This
has become a very informal conversation.
This is just under construction still. So this was sent through about 6 months ago. It must be closer now, but all of that is park and playground. And so you can see how big the community centre is. But this thing is epic. There's wetlands in it. There's all sorts of kind of mazes. It's going to be pretty incredible. So we're really looking forward to getting down there and having a play.
I'm looking forward to seeing it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've seen this recently. Just going to the people who are joining us, feel free to take your mics off. And does anyone have any questions? Don't be shy.
I do actually. I have a question, Rodney. So,
hi, Neil.
Yeah. So that it's a terrific, rational, robust project. Absolutely love it. I think it's a tremendous job. The opening up your briefing to the general public is a dangerous step. That could be pretty open-ended.
Yeah.
Because you're setting yourself up to disappoint an awful lot of people, I suspect, who want I don't know, fanciful things. But that was a brave step. It was obviously a worthwhile one for you, though.
I think front-ending the process is really important. So, we really have been trained to be so specific about what we're designing in some of the work that we've done in the past. And for this, there was an element of guesswork happening. And we really thought that by front-ending that process would mean that we could have those discussions early on, rather than when concrete was being poured and when steel was being kind of dropped in. And there was patterns to the responses that were really legible and able to be used in some formal manner. So it also supported this notion of it being as flexible as possible and knowing that whatever we say, is going to somehow change. I think even on the first day I went down there and the hub manager at the time was sort of sticky taping curtains to parts of the windows, and it's like, it's too light, there's too much light in here. I was like, well, okay. But so there is a reality that happens and goes along with the architect's vision, and then the reality of how people want to use a building. And a community hub should be handed over to the community. So we're really excited to see it take life and to see the plants grow over the top of it and it to be embedded in the community, because I think for it to work, it really needs to be owned by the people that want to be around it.
And from everything that I've certainly heard, and I have a little bit to do with Play Street, the landscape architects, is that the community have absolutely embraced it.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, we haven't been able to get down there since, obviously for obvious reasons, but it's one of those things where I guess you're trying to move the community away from the normal kind of situations. I think the only real communal thing that's happening down there is the local pub with the playground out the back, and it's a great pub, but it doesn't give a lot of opportunity and options for people to gather or to meet and to have an interest in something. So, I mean, that obviously community centres have incredible value to them. And for us, it was about creating the porosity of different size spaces so that you didn't feel completely overwhelmed by this one enormous space. You could have smaller rooms, or you could then begin to divide spaces down. And hopefully, if it gets going, you have multiple events happening at the same time as well. So we're really, really interested to see that whole area come up. the villages to be built. There's a hospital that's been built across the road as well, which we were sort of racing against at the time during construction. And I like to say we beat them and we were cheaper. But it's a strange thing to be asked to design and build a building in a completely greenfield site and then to watch everything come up around it. So in many ways, I think there's a lot more that's going to happen with the building that we're really interested in seeing unfold over time.
And I mean, one last sort of thing from me, Kingston is an area where like there's nearly a bit of a lack of legibility in the urban design. And I think that this is really, I mean, maybe this is just a comment, but has really contributed to the community because it started to create some definition and some parameters for space that I think that have added some clarity to the place. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, when I come to Tassie a lot, and Bruny Island was certainly our first major discovery.
Yeah.
And I must have been there 30 or 40 times, and we would just fly past Kingston. You'd just go straight past it on the freeway. And now there's, I think, this ability in the location of the building to anchor it and to give it some sense of identity. Sort of, as you come in, you look across and you see this floating roof and you think, God, what is that thing? So hopefully it sort of begins to anchor the whole entrance sequence as well, because it's a bit backhanded at the moment. And I think hopefully then, attract, the residents who are around as much as within Kingston and let them all kind of, activate it. So that was a lot of putting that signage in, was really that identifier and trying to get people to be proud of their council and their area, which is not always the way, unfortunately.
How did you find the council to work with? Because certainly my experience in those early days, they were very open to things. They were aspirational, you might say, but in some ways without really knowing what they were aspiring to.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
but genuine about that and really open to, and they wanted, I felt they wanted experts to guide them in that. And so that, I think, allows a great outcome.
Absolutely. And they were super trustworthy. We were very conscious of being, the guys from Melbourne blowing in, and obviously a lot younger than...
You like to call you a blow in,
Yeah, exactly. The secret was to bring Krispy Kreme donuts to every meeting. So,
right.
Once I did that, I was everyone's best friend. But no, they were super trustworthy, and they also had a very clear vision, as you say, but they didn't really know what that vision was. And once they committed to the gesture, I mean, it was a bit of for us, it was a no-brainer to keep the existing building. I think the other 3 projects that were in the competition just kind of erased that whole gymnasium. So I think that they felt strongly about retaining that building for obvious reasons, sustainability, and obviously protecting the budget. So once they committed to that, I think that became really the important driver, and they said, no, we've got to do the roof. We can't value manage that. And they were very committed to what is, I guess, the backbone of the design. So I think
even that story in the building.
Yeah, they should definitely be commended. And again, that park that they're doing at the back just shows how avant-garde they're being about their community and what they're building down there.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Does anyone else have any questions on the chat? If you know,
I've gone over now anyway. So over to Neil.
Yay, thanks so much, Rodney.
Thanks a lot.
We totally enjoyed having you. We enjoyed watching you on the Tassie Awards. You were hilarious. So looking forward to seeing you when you're next down.
Thanks so much. I'll definitely pop in. Thank you.
Awesome. Take care.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'll hang in, but I'll turn my screen off.
Awesome. No drama. All right. Next, we have Neil Bourne from Denton Corker Marshall. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you.
So Neil, obviously, as part of the, or I suppose the lead of the team who created the Bridge of Remembrance here in Hobart. And this bridge links two of the city's really most significant public spaces. So the Cenotaph with Soldiers Memorial Avenue on the Queen's Domain. And the design really is really respectful to the sensitive cultural heritage of this area, and also the environmental values of this site. It's elegant, restrained, yet it's open to, I mean, allowing people to have an interpretation of it, their own interpretation. It provides the space physically and mentally for people to pause and reflect. It's an elegant twisting plane, a 200-metre long bridge that connects both sides of a broad highway entering Hobart, providing a distinctive entry portal to the city. This 4-metre wide bridge emerges from the ground as an angular shard of metal, forming the vertical retaining wall at the base of the ramp. The plane slowly leans back, momentarily reaching a horizontal position at the end of Anzac Parade, before continuing to twist and slowly rise to a near vertical as it terminates on the western side. And because it's at the sort of the entrance of the city, I think we're all Hobartians are very familiar with it. What some of you might not know is that it's won numerous awards, the Dirk Bolt Award for Urban Design in the Tasmanian Chapter Awards, along with a national commendation for urban design recently. So I hope you'll join me in welcoming Neil to speak about the project.
Thanks. You pretty much said it all, so I'm not sure what more I can add to that. That was a good intro. Thanks. Because it is a place for contemplation and restraint, I'm going to pause at certain points and let the visuals do the talking. I'm notorious for talking too much anyway, so it won't be that my mic's cut out. It'll just be because I think it's an appropriate time to just to let you experience it. So I'll be showing a brief, small animation from the a bit of movie from the animation and the drone footage, sorry, and then a little presentation on the evolution of the design and what's behind it, and then I've got a 360 virtual tour to hop around where we can actually see, did we succeed in our intentions. So I shall share my screen. Okay, we're sharing.
Great.
All right, super. So yeah, look, this is from the drone footage from the opening day. So you'll see the people start to swarm across. And it was a tremendous event. Obviously, it's a great import to the community, to the council, but also to there's a large presence from from veterans and from the defence fraternity. Because the project itself is funded by the Australian government's Anzac Centenary Funds to mark the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War, and delivered for the city of Hobart. And we designed it in collaboration with our long-term partners at Barak, responsible for all of the engineering aspects. The bridge itself started off from the concept from the bridge actually came about quite rapidly, but really triggered by, as all I think good design should, from the constraints and the opportunities presented by the site and the program, the requirements, and the technical opportunities as well in this particular instance, which were very much informed by our colleagues at Arak. So I shall just pause that and switch over to the presentation itself. So as you mentioned, it does link these two really important spaces with the cenotaph on this side here, and with the Soldiers Memorial Avenue on the Queen's Domain side, which in the infinite wisdom of some traffic engineer at some point decided to put a multi-lane highway through it and sever these two spaces. I'd like to say we don't do that anymore, but I'm not quite so sure. So there's a very important practical job it's doing in linking these spaces and also linking to the aquatic centre. But more than that, it's got to do a cognitive, conceptual job and a memorialisation task as well. So it's multi-layered, pragmatic through to quite conceptual and spiritual, dare I say it as well. All this trying to layered inside a bridge. So as you mentioned, you achieve this through this pair of twisting planes, which create this physical link, but also this distinctive threshold to the city. So some of the challenges we had to deal with, there's the contextual challenges, which included this very broad highway, which also had extreme level differences, believe it or not, from one side of the road to the other. You don't pick up as you're driving down it, but there was, which didn't work in our favour. Of course, with all these things, they work against you. Similarly with the lay of the land, the Anzac Parade itself falls away, and we were chasing our tail with the grade at all times as it approaches the cenotaph. So the geometries were not helping us. There was also the constraints of the memorials themselves. So it's not just the cenotaph on the Anzac Parade side, but there were also numerous other memorials on the aquatic centre side, including the Boer War Memorial there on the right, on the lower image. And the trees themselves, as part of the Soldiers Memorial Walk, the avenue, are listed as well and protected. So we had to be very careful about how we wove ourselves between all those assets and constraints on that side. So how do we do that? Look, we did test other alignments, twisting around here, and to be honest, as a purely pragmatic solution, and perhaps if we'd been doing this in the 1970s, we would have just taken the shortest, easiest route straight across, landed at a high point, and happy days. We got a much shorter bridge, which would have been across this sort of alignment through here. But it really would not have responded at all to that clear, very strong, symmetrical axis, albeit the cenotaph itself is about 5 degrees twisted off of that axis. Nonetheless, the axis is there. And it seemed to us that whatever other alignment which might have worked more for levels more successfully certainly did not work from an urban design perspective nearly as well. So we landed on this symmetrical configuration and on the alignment with the cenotaph and the Anzac Parade. Now, fortuitously, and so some things do go well, that did result in a reasonably good alignment between the minefield of trees and smaller memorials on the aquatic centre side, and so that was a happy condition. So we'll thank the design gods for that. But the design response itself, it did respond to that duality, because the pragmatic and the I'll just go back one there, the pragmatic and the spiritual, but also the different typologies and landforms which we got to deal with. On the cenotaph side, very manicured, symmetrical, clearly man-made, very formal. Whereas on the other side, it's very organic, it's informal. There's still a lot of the natural conditions to be found on there. And so there's that duality right there right away. And we embrace that duality on there with the expression. So you'll see there's a lot of, as I talked through, a lot of doubling up. So there's obviously the two sides of the bridge, the two wings and the two planes as they twist, but also the colouring, the black and the white, the silver and the charcoal, and the embracing of the two arms on the one side. So that duality has always sort of interested us in that contrast between conditions. We're trying to bring those together in the design. And we like to think that there should be an inevitability to the outcomes, and we think we got that. You know, it seems, well, of course you'd put it on axis. So of course you would form it like this, and so you know you've kind of got the right solution. So how do we do this? There's a lot of as well as the alignment. There's a driver and the topography. There's also the pragmatic aspects of the structure as well. So, the conversation. I had a conversation with my good friend Peter Botel at Arup, who's been working for years, is a tremendous structural engineer. And I just said, well, it's going to have to span from here to here. We couldn't have any piers in the freeway itself, in the highway itself. So it's going to be a simple span. And we talked around the moment diagram that would generate. And I said, what does it want to be? And there was sketching away, and he described a moment diagram. So I said, oh, so kind of like this. So I said, so in theory, this point here, then you don't need any structure. The forces balance each other out. So yeah, that's right. And that's this point of contraflexion. It's called just here, which seemed to me to be. But really, this elevation is the moment diagram. You could superimpose the moment diagram over this elevation, and they'd be very, very similar. So the forces balance each other out about 25% across the span, the main span, which aligned, once I drew this up, with where we wanted the thinness to occur. We wanted this to have as little presence as possible as people were driving into the city, so as not to disturb the views of the skyline of the city, but more importantly of the mountain and beyond. So that was very important to us to get that as thin as we possibly could. And so we took that moment diagram and to provide the forces. So it doesn't want to be, obviously can't be thin all the way along. So we have that very thin profile at that point of contraflexure, about 25% of the way across. But then as the forces increase, as it needs to do more work, the wings fold up. So as they need to do more work, and as whether that's providing the depth vertically or upwards or downwards, it provides the structural support that the structure demands, which also provided us with the enclosure and enveloping of space, which we'll come to in a second, which we've strove for. So then another layer on this, of course, is the referencing of the associations, with possible associations, and it is multi-layered. It can mean it's an abstract piece. It can mean anything to anybody, and they're all equally valid. But some of the ones which resonated with me were of the prow of the ship, and whether that's one of the Gallipoli boats down the bottom there, or one of the contemporary trimarans, which are manufactured in Hobart, or the profile of an aircraft wing, and obviously military associations with those, but also just maritime associations with the strong maritime heritage of Tasmania and Hobart in particular. And then, of course, the curvature itself echoed the hills of Hobart and Tasmania and even the shoreline. So there's all those different layering, which are of interpretations there. So look, yes, the bridge emerges from the ground. There's an angular shard of metal and slowly leans back, as you mentioned, before reaching that horizontal point, and then continuing to twist up and then reach for the sky. So suddenly it emerges from the ground and leaps and reaches for the sky. So here emerges from the earth, spans and leaps across the freeway. Provides that minimum profile, but also that really is actually one of the surprising elements that came from this was how strong the soffit is. Just what a pleasure it is underneath there. But very the point of contraflexure, which is really it's about 600 millimeters deep, which for a 64-meter span, it's about about a 1 in 100. That's a very, very slender profile indeed. So we're pretty pleased with that. But then as it reaches for the sky and leaves the earth, in fact, and these cantilevers, which are part of the back span, are actually working as well from an engineering perspective. Those are tied down and helping to keep the span up and working to keep that profile as thin as possible. But architecturally, it provides these sentinels, if you like, which embrace the path the user as he walks across the bridge, before then finally folding back, providing that protection and enclosure from the highway underneath. Nobody wants to see the cars, nobody wants to hear the cars, so they're beneath you but you wouldn't know it, and then folding back to reveal the views to the precinct itself, and I'll show more of that in a second on the VR. But also these surprising, well, not surprising, we knew they were going to come up, but there are these lovely, delightful forms which can generate. So this has been, people have referred to this as like the wings of an angel or a butterfly. And it's these surprising geometries, which one simple manipulation, the twisting of that plane, all we're doing is twisting that plane, but it generates all these different surprising vistas and conditions and angles and shapes, and of course the play of light upon it over day and night brings another dimension as well. But it's still a bridge. It still has these robust details and expressing as this does the what is actually going on with the structure. There's no artifice here. This is all what you see is required until you get the relationship and the view from the cenotaph itself and from the eternal flame is very modest and restrained. There's nothing fussy about this. It still lets the flame and the cenotaph do the talking. So I'll just quickly switch over to the VR. So this is available, publicly available. I'm sure we can send a link around for this. I think that might even be available, which is 360 videos, which and stills, which I took when I was down there last in February, in the absence of going out there. So do tell me this is too jerky, but this is the approach coming in on the highway from the airport, and you can see there the very thin edge, and this is where you see the contrast between the silver and the charcoal. So this is the point where, even though it's very thin, it's certainly not unassuming and does form that gateway, that threshold. And underneath, one of the sort of surprising elements, it looks like there does look like the hull of a ship that's been put up in dry dock. Again, very clean, very unfussy. Now on the other side, in that twist, folds back down and folds back into the ground. And actually another lovely spot, if you get down there, is underneath the arms there, where they start to fold down. It was like an umbrella over the top. So I suggest you nip in there and have a look if you get to visit. And moving across to the other side, you see here the relationship to the memorials. One memorial was required to be relocated, which was done in discussion with the families of the descendants, and by all accounts, they're actually it's in a better spot actually now than it was before. It's just to the other side of the bridge here, and much better address to the Soldiers Memorial Walk rather than the car park entrance, which is where it was before. So if I just now pop up onto the approach. So this is one of the curated experiences which were designed in, which was to mark the approach. So you could see it standing up above the tree line, the two sentinels waiting ahead for you. Then, not a bit too far, as you approach, waiting to embrace, you get your first glimpse of the cenotaph framed between the two wings the other side. You then pass between. You start to get that enclosure. And then as you pass by, the wings start to fold back. You get that protection from the highway beneath.
I mean, for me, Neil, it's really interesting. I'm absolutely terrified of heights.
Beg your pardon?
I'm terrified of heights.
Okay, I'm not a fan of heights either, so yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So for me, on this, the experience of walking over this is that there's something quite poetic about it, in a way that it's like when you need to, you feel really safe. I felt really safe, and then when I'm able to, it's like I kind of get released from that, and I don't. And it's like, yeah, it's like those folds open up, and there's something really beautiful and poetic about it.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and I think I might have mentioned in the when we were in the awards discussions that when I went over there with the foreman from the excellent contractors from Fulton Hogan and Hayward's from Launceston, who did all the hard work, and he said he'd gone over there with his guys, and he described back to me almost exactly what I'd written in the design report, but in his own words. It was very close to that experience of the folding out, and exactly as you said, of being enclosed and then it being revealed, and then getting that experience, having the whole space revealed to you. He's a smart guy, but nonetheless, he's a big hairy contractor, and the fact that he was moved, he was genuinely moved by this. He really was moved by this, and said to his guys, you've got to get up there, go up there one at a time and experience this, because this is why we've been working so hard, for that experience. So it's great. It was great that he did that's really landed. Okay, I'm done.
And for me also, and I'll be completely honest with you, when it was in construction, you worry. I worried about that view to Kenyani, but it's so respectful the way you've done it, and it's such a sort of, in a way, it's a simple gesture. The thinness, the way that it sort of folds out there at the middle of the highway, but it works so beautifully.
Thanks. Yeah. So, and simplicity and restraint. It's not easy in this overstimulated world to sell that, and it's to the credit of the city of Hobart, to the council. We landed on this design very quickly, like within a couple of weeks. We got back to council very quickly, and they hadn't seen anything we've been working on. We turned up in Hobart and showed it to them, and right away they knew it was the right solution. But nonetheless, it's not a showy solution. It's a leap of faith to go with one simple gesture. And leave it there. Yeah.
Well, I do think that I think that restraint is the quality, can make for incredible architecture.
Yeah,
And sometimes it's hard to come by.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
I'm wondering, does anyone else have any questions that they would like to ask? And feel free, if you don't want to, you can ask them on the chat there. If you don't want to turn your sound off or on, as the case might be. I have had one. Someone asked, they've said they think that it's very beautiful, and they're wondering about the width of the bridge. And if that was part of the brief, was there sort of, and it strikes me as something that's kind of got the dimensions of something. You could have a procession. I mean, obviously. Yeah,
well, that's a really good point, because the width, I think it's 4 meters wide. Remember, is a wide shared use path. That's wider than normal. But it was to accommodate the large numbers that we anticipated at Anzac Day. And similarly with the balustrades, they're quite robust. I mean, we would like to have got a much thinner, more visually recessive balustrade. But the fact is, this is sized for crowd events. So this is the same loading you would have at a stadium. Therefore, it needs to be very robust, and we worked very hard with Barak to get it as slender as we possibly could, while still meeting those very, very high crowd loadings. It is sized for large groups as well as the individual.
Do we have any other questions? I think that might be it. Well, we're really delighted, Neil and Rodney, that you have, like for us here, we obviously it's been fantastic to see these projects come to life and to see the way also that the community has responded to them. And I think it's on both instances it's been incredibly positive, and obviously we have a greater insight into the architectural community and their response to them, which has been equally as embracing. So thank you for sharing the projects with us tonight. It's wonderful to be able to do this in a virtual way so that more people can listen, and also the talks will be put up on our YouTube channel, so people after the fact are able to watch them as well. So I'd just like to, this talk has been a part of a broader set of events that we've held over about a week. I was saying before everyone joined, to Rodney and Neil and Katie, that we've got event fatigue because we're not used to seeing so many people, given how we've all been living, but recently. So it's been really wonderful to be able to engage with people and then to engage tonight virtually. So I'd like to just quickly thank, we've had some sponsors for our Open House program this year, and they've been wonderful, and they've been long-term sponsors of our event, which is Open House Hobart. And they are the City of Hobart, the Tasmanian Government, our design partner for Targo, Access Solutions, Austral Bricks and Lysat, who have enabled us to show. We opened over the weekend around 40 buildings, and we opened about 10 virtually. So those as well will be on YouTube. So thanks for joining us, and thanks Neil and Rodney. We really appreciate you joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks Katie for organising it. It's awesome.
Thanks.
Someone wrote a beautiful comment, a great project to conclude a terrific Open House Hobart. Thank you, Marshall Fieldman.
That's nice.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.